With the 2.0 update in Super Mario Maker 2 came many new important and helpful items like Spike and the Master Sword. With these items came an item I thought was kind of unimpressive, being the P-Switch block. It seemed like it didn't add much, and it's just a repeat of items we already have. I still don't see it used awfully much, especially compared to the other items in the update. So today, I thought it'd be a fun challenge to show how these items can be useful. So today, I'm going to be going over tips and tricks on using the P-Switch blocks in useful ways. But before we get into that, did you know that less than 10% of viewers are actually subscribed to the channel? If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe to the channel because it'd help me out a huge bunch and let you get notified whenever I upload. But with that being said, let's jump right into some tips, tricks, and ideas on using the P-Switch block in Super Mario Maker 2. As always, we are going to start off simple and move to more complicated features later on. First off, we have what I've seen them use the most in, indicators. If you don't know, indicator blocks basically tell the player where to stand when doing any action, whether it be firing a super ball or doing a shell jump. These indicators are immensely helpful for Kaizo levels, or just levels where some parts may be confusing. P-Switch blocks work very well as the turned off variant is easy to see, and while you could in theory use on-off blocks, you likely use those more than P-Switch blocks. Normally tracks were used, which could be confusing, however P-Switch blocks are a lot smaller and make things a lot clearer. It doesn't have to be only Kaizo levels that do stuff like this too, like maybe they could show where to fire something or where to jump. Here for example, a Koopa comes out of this clear pipe, and the player might not know this and try to jump somewhere else. An indicator helps here immensely as the player will now know where to be able to jump. This is a simple use for these blocks, sure, but very helpful, so I'd use them for a part of your levels that might be confusing. Now if you work on a lot of boss fights in your levels, you probably use timers. These basically make it to where the player has to stay inside a room for a set amount of time before being rewarded either with an exit or a weapon to defeat a boss. There are many different types of timers like shell, spike, and track timers. But what does this have to do with the P block? Well, since they can't be destroyed, they can be helpful in making your timers last for longer. P-switches act as their own timers themselves, so adding them on can make for a long timer. This can be helpful if you believe that your boss is too easy with a basic timer. It's pretty easy to set up. Here we'll just have a spike ball timer. Basically, on top of one of the hard blocks, place a muncher, and underneath that, a P-switch. Then have a P-block in front of the launcher to temporarily stop it from firing. It's a pretty simple setup, and it also has another perk being multiple phases. Perhaps in the room the player is trying to survive in, more things drop in upon the P-switch being activated, thus making the boss harder as you go on. This is pretty similar to a boss fight I made in my Spike Ball level in video, where a P-switch is activated after hitting Bowser twice, causing Mario to now also have to dodge a large Spike Ball. This was done by simply placing a Bill Blaster on top of a P-switch block so that the gate not only opens once the switch is active, but also stays open until the boss fight is finished. This is very helpful for making your boss fights a little bit longer or maybe a little bit more unique. Not every single boss fight needs multiple phases, but I highly suggest looking into it. One thing I see constantly in levels that require the use of P-switches are some pretty easy cheese. Basically, the creator will have a P-switch in a pipe that the player needs to activate to get through a door. However, they may not think about the player going back to get another P-switch, which could be used to get past the next section easily. Using P-switch blocks though, this is a super easy fix. Just place down the dotted version over the P-switch dispenser so that no more P-switches can be given out until the original P-switch has run out. Before, this wouldn't work as the player could just collect coins covering the pipe, so this is immensely helpful. Also, if you have a P-switch lying in a previous room, make sure to get those spawn blocked. Spawn blocking is basically when you have a block cover up an entity's spawn area, so it won't spawn when the area loads. We are going to be using this again in a little bit, but for now just place a dotted P block over where the P-switch spawns, so if the player tries to reload the room, they can't get another one. For my final cheese prevention tip, it may be best to sometimes cover the player's path with these blocks. That way they can't keep a P-switch timer going for the next section. I tried to avoid this as much as possible because this slows down your level a lot, but if it is necessary, it's completely understandable. So I mentioned spawn blocking earlier, so here's a more in-depth look as to how this can be used. Mario enters a room with a bunch of bullets blasting at him. He needs to hit the P-switch in order to enter the door at the top. After some difficult maneuvers, Mario hits the switch and is able to get through the door. Now he's in another room filled with Pokies and Dry Bones for Smash, where now he has to get to the other side and enter the door. Now what's so interesting about this? Well, despite them both having completely different challenges, they take place in the exact same room. So how does this work? While on top of the original starting position of the enemies and objects of the first room, we place dotted P blocks, as this will stop them from spawning in because there are blocks blocking them. Similarly, do the opposite for the second room items, placing a filled-in P block over them to prevent them from spawning until you hit a P switch. Then, upon activating the switch and reloading the room, they'll spawn in. A few other things of note is that making the player spawn in on a donut platform may be very beneficial, as to get the room to work and look nice, you may need to have some items fall into place, so Mario having to wait on a donut is a good way to have to do that. Another important setup is this one right over here, which basically makes it to where if a P-switch is activated, it'll always stay on until the room is unloaded. These are a lot better than bricks and coins, as those can get collected and destroyed, which can mess up the results. You can even make a whole level based around this concept, where you have to go back and forth throughout a level, but the level changes each time. You can also combine this with on-off switches to do the same thing as well. Overall, spawn blocking is a very helpful technique. Next up here is another small one about rewarding the player. Maybe in your level you have a section where the player has to parkour using these blocks under a time limit to pass. However, maybe if the player does it fast enough, they can get a little reward. All you'd have to do is place a big coin into the ground or into the ceiling with filled-in P blocks above them or below them, so if the player gets there in time, they're able to get the big coin, but if they're too slow, the block will block their path. If you do decide to do this though, make sure the player can't get trapped and soft-locked. This is a pretty simple fix. Just have a one-way or semi-solid so the player can exit the coin area through there, but not enter. Okay, onto my final two ideas for this video, and they're both kind of like the final challenges for a level. Basically, these ideas both are variants of each other, where Mario has to take tight jumps with P-switches above him. If he activates them, then the floor below him will deactivate and kill him. So I've made two designs using this idea. The first one has the player needing to collect 2 red coins in this cramped room. As I said earlier, if the player jumps even a bit too high, he will die. On top of that though, the player also needs to avoid bullet bills blasting towards him. There are many different ways that this can be customized, with what enemies are in the room, how big and far away the platforms are from each other, etc. I also think adding the heartbeat sound effect to this room would fit very well, as it is pretty intense. The way the bill blasters are right here allows the players to jump on them, which I liked. However, just making them shoot 1 block higher will prevent the player from doing this and will make it work a lot harder. The second version of this room runs on a timer instead of red coins. Basically, Mario is trapped between 2 walls of saws, and he has to keep jumping back and forth between the different platforms in order to survive. He has to keep going until the spike ball timer eventually runs out, thus letting him go through the door below. A few more things of note about this design. You're definitely going to want to have Mario dodge enemies in this room, because you need to have some sort of way to force him to go back and forth between the platforms. If you want to use the saws on tracks like I do here, make sure the tracks are set up similar so that Mario doesn't get crushed between them. The other thing unique about this design is that of course it has a timer. There are many different timers you can use, but I decided to go with the spike ball timer as I felt it made a good amount of time, and was easy to disable when it runs out. You can always change the timer to whatever you like and however long you want, just as long as it activates an on-off switch and does it only once. For this example, I just have a dotted line block in front of the bill blaster, so that when the on-off switch is hit, no more spike balls can come. Another optional thing is having it activate a P-switch at the end. I do this by simply placing a ceiling P-switch above a muncher which is on top of the on-off block. There are many different ways to use these ceiling P-switches and P-blocks to make tight sections, and these were just 2 examples of that. This is very fun and intense, so I highly suggest experimenting with this. But anyways, that's it for this video. Do you still think P-blocks are on the bit of the useless side, or do you think they're more helpful now? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and maybe even subscribe for more on Mario Maker 2 and anything Nintendo Switch. Before we end here, I do want to apologize if this video is delayed or a bit sloppy. My computer broke during the making of this, so I had to get a new one, and I'm not quite used to this yet. On top of that, even though I swear I backed up my file, I lost the livestream highlights video, which took me over 6 hours to edit so far, and I was less than a third of the way done, so I might have to cancel that project, unfortunately. I'm doing everything I can to get that back, but I'm not sure it will happen. But anyways, my Twitter and Discord servers are linked in the description. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.